Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Focus, a special Africa news program on Switch TV, Kenya's #1 youth television channel, right here in the middle of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. My name is Cherotich Bernadette. Our sign language interpreter for today is Miss Tracy Dorcas. Now let's take a look at the stories making our headlines.
Trains of hope. South African trains bring healthcare workers to hard-to-reach areas. Senegal rejects request to license dozens of foreign fishing trawlers.
Now let's take a look at the stories making headlines around the continent.
The chairman of Tanzania's main opposition party, Freeman Mbowe, has been hospitalized after being attacked and beaten up in a politically motivated attack and injured by unknown assailants. Mbowe was set upon late Monday as he returned home in the capital, Dodoma. Mbowe has repeatedly accused the government of covering up the true extent of the coronavirus in Tanzania, where authorities stopped updating figures in April. He and several others opposition MPs were briefly jailed in March in connection with a banned protest against President John Magufuli's government, which has been accused of crushing dissent and harassing political opponents. The strongman leader who was elected in 2015 is due to run for a second term in October in the country, and the assault comes a day after Chadema MP Tundu Lissu announced his intention to run against Magufuli in the presidential election at that time. The Ugandan government has announced it will let a South African company carry out a feasibility study for a dam in Murchison Falls National Park, reversing an earlier cabinet decision and prompting a strong backlash from civil society. This month, the country's electricity regulatory authority called for public comment on a permit application filed by Bonang Power and Energy to build a 360-megawatt hydropower dam in the park where the Nile River famously plunges 45 meters over an escarpment. There was an immediate outcry from environmental groups, tour operators and local communities concerned about the impact a dam would have on the falls and the ecology of the national park. The 11th of June marked the 10th year anniversary of the first FIFA World Cup hosted on Africa's soil. Residents of Soweto, which hosted the opening and closing ceremonies, still hold fond memories of the event. Meanwhile, the local economy reels under the coronavirus shutdown. Dr. Danny Jordan, who was head of the 2010 organizing committee and is now the president of the South African Football Association, says that after 2010, Africa became a destination for tourism, for investment, for trade, and hailed the tournament legacy. Of the 10 stadiums that hosted the 64 matches during the month-long tournament, 5 were built from scratch and 5 received upgrades so they could collectively seat more than 500,000 spectators. The stadiums are now used by football and rugby teams. The tournament also catapulted women's football to prominence. A plethora of women referees and coaches have also emerged over the last decade. A premier women's football league established a year before the World Cup has since grown to boast more than 140 teams and thousands of female players. Banyana, the national women's team, is rated among the top 50 by FIFA Women's World Rankings. Among the many memorable and unique Africa icons of the 2010 World Cup were the vuvuzela long plastic trumpet horns now adopted worldwide.
Now, to start us off, in the Gambia, the NGO Sea Shepherd is helping the authorities to combat illegal fishing. It carries out joint operations with the Gambian Navy, which deals with arrests. Neighboring Senegal has just denied its waters to dozens of foreign trawlers after a joint campaign by environmentalists and local fishermen. Let's take a look at this story.
Senegal has rejected requests to license dozens of foreign fishing trawlers following an uproar from environmentalists and struggling fishermen in the West African state. Two government officials say the applications, which are originally submitted in April, have been rejected. The government said that it would consider permits for 54 foreign vessels.
Yeah. So usually the logbook is very poorly bad. very poorly handle. They only write a coordinate, which they're supposed to write also sorts of fish they caught and how many, how much. In addition, they usually apply for shrimp license, and they use a smaller mesh size to catch fish.
The move triggered a backlash from environmentalists and local fishermen who mounted a campaign to stop the move. This follows years of tension between local fishermen and foreign factory ships, which are often accused of contributing to severe overfishing in the region.
We are lack of bigger boats that can stay in the water for 1 month, 2 months. Yeah, but with the help of the Sea Shepherds, we can be able to do our job.
Senegal's 50,000 fishermen, who mostly take to the Atlantic aboard wooden boats known as pirogues, have struggled to adapt to the declining stocks. Recently, their revenues have also been hit by the closure of markets to curb the coronavirus. Government officials were unable to immediately clarify the number of permitted requests for foreign trawlers that had been rejected. But NGO Greenpeace said that the government had rejected permits for 52 foreign vessels. The process for acquiring fishing permits in Senegal is highly opaque.
These arrests result in fines that are critical revenue for the government, but also they serve as a deterrence, and the presence of a vessel on patrol in the Gambia prevents industrial vessels from coming into an area that's reserved for artisanal fishermen.
Abdou Karim Sall, the president of Senegalese Artisanal Fishing Association, said that he had welcomed the rejection of permits, but added that he wanted more government transparency. New tension over foreign trawlers comes at a difficult time for Senegalese fishing sector. According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, over a third of fish stocks from Senegal to Nigeria are overfished, and up to half of the West African's annual catch could be illegal. Fishing is one of the Senegal's top industries, accounting for about 17% of export revenues in 2018, according to government figures.
Now, South African strains of hope bring healthcare workers to hard-to-reach areas deviating from routine healthcare to boost testing for the novel coronavirus.
South Africa's state-controlled rail network Transnet has 2 trains which muscle across the country 9 months every year, operating as mobile healthcare clinics. The name of the trains combine local Sesotho and Setswana languages, which means good and clean health. With a call for an increase of testing in South Africa's rural areas such as Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal provinces, Transnet has shelved the daily mobile healthcare services of the trains to support the Department of Health in testing for COVID-19 in regions where medical resources are scarce and where there have been rapid increase of infections.
I now suddenly realize that corona is real, and I think I should know my status, know if I'm safe or not. And my worry is that my aunt is a nurse, so she goes to work every day, then comes back stay with us. So I think I should know my status, know if I'm safe or not.
The first train started its 3rd week in the Eastern Cape province, which currently has 12% of the country's infection rate. Residents in the small community of Dutwaya in the Amothol district are concerned over their safety and the spread of the virus.
Part of what we've been clarifying to communities is the fact that we have shelved the pillow paper services. We are now solely dealing with the issue of the COVID-19. So community...
Staff members from the Transnet bring together the logistics of travel, working together with health department officials who perform screening and testing.
The station is accessible, then people have been informed to come and be tested. And to an extent, the department and also at times try to provide transport for people so that they can come to get tested, to be tested.
South Africa accounts for nearly 25% of the continent's total cases, according to the World Health Organization. Most of South Africa's infections, around 2/3, are found in Western Cape province, a popular tourist destination home to the coastal city of Cape Town.
The Eastern Cape is a high risk because most of its people are not working. They are working in Cape Town, they are working in Gauteng, and the movement of these clients between the Gauteng and the Cape Town, and they come in their own areas. There's a cross-infection that has happened in this area, and it has made us not to be able to manage. But now the lockdown, the uplifting of the lockdown is also, we are expecting a high risk of clients that to be detected.
The latest figures released by the Health Ministry showed that the virus has so far killed 1,354 people in the country since the first case was detected in March.
All right, the World Health Organization's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says that the coronavirus pandemic situation is worsening around the globe, warning against complacency. And as mass protests for racial justice sweep across the world, the United Nations Health Agency urged everyone demonstrating to do so safely.
More than 100,000 cases have been reported on 9 of the past 10 days. Yesterday, more than 136 cases were reported, the most in a single day so far. WHO fully supports equality and the global movement against racism. We reject discrimination of all kinds. We encourage all those protesting around the world to do so safely. As much as possible, keep at least 1 meter from others. Clean your hands, cover your cough, and wear a mask if you attend a protest. More than 6 months into this pandemic, this is not the time for any country to take its foot off the pedal. This is the time for countries to continue to work hard.
All right, we're going to take a short break for now, I'm sorry. But before that, I'd like to urge you to remember to SMS us on our direct line, 22999, free of charge. Engage us on our social media handles, @Switch TV Kenya, both on Facebook and on Twitter. Give us your 2 cents about the show. Before we go for a break, let's take a look at what's coming up.
The European Union launched a humanitarian air bridge to support the fight against the coronavirus in Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, welcome back to the program. Now, French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, his Belgian counterpart Philippe Goffin, and European Commissioner for Crisis Management Janez Lenaric disembarked in Kinshasa from the first humanitarian plane intended to help the DRC as part of the fight against the new coronavirus pandemic. More flights will carry at least 40 tons of aid, such as water purifiers and medical supplies, provided by the EU, governments, and humanitarian agencies. Let's take a look at this.
The European Union launched a humanitarian air bridge to support the fight against the coronavirus in the Democratic Republic of Congo. French Foreign Minister and his Belgian counterpart Philippe Goffin and European Commissioner for Crisis Management will travel to Kinshasa on a flight from Brussels. They will meet President Felix Tshisekedi in the capital before traveling to the eastern city of Goma in the troubled region on the border with Rwanda.
La République démocratique du Congo a des amis.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has friends, and among its friends is the European Union, which is a strong friend of your country, which wants to support your country in its fight against epidemics.
Pays dans sa lutte contre les épidémies.
More flights will carry at least 40 tons of aid such as water purifiers and medical supplies provided by EU, government and humanitarian agencies.
This is a humanitarian equipment, but also medical equipment to support the efforts of the Democratic Republic of Congo to deal with the coronavirus pandemic.
Face à la pandémie de coronavirus.
So far, Africa has been spared the worst of the pandemic with only 4,755 deaths recorded and 170,286 cases compared to more than 180,000 deaths and 2 million cases in Europe. But poorer countries like the DRC will struggle to cope if the outbreak intensifies, and Brussels has set aside 3.25 billion euros in grants and 1.4 billion euros in loans to help countries through the crisis.
Now, moving on to some somber news, More than 50 people, mostly from sub-Saharan Africa, died when a boat carrying migrants bound for Italy sank off Tunisia. Another 17 bodies were recovered, with still one person missing, raising the total of deaths to 52 since the authorities were alerted by a fisherman near the port city of Sfax. The Navy and Coast Guards used divers and a helicopter to search for the bodies, most of which were found in the same area. DNA samples were taken in the hope of eventually identifying the bodies before they were all laid to rest in a number of graves. According to the authorities, the boat's captain, who is a 48-year-old Tunisian, was among the dead. Council trucks were waiting in front of the hospital to transfer the bodies to a cemetery in the outskirts of Sfax. Witnesses had told authorities that the victims were believed to be passengers on a boat that set off a week earlier for Italy with 52 people on board. Pockets of anti-racism protesters in a few African countries follow sweeping demonstrations in the United States and Europe after the police killing of George Floyd. But in contrast to the thousands taking to the streets elsewhere, solidarity events in Africa have been smaller, often led by left-wing movements. Let's take a look at the story.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
As anti-racism demonstrations sweep the globe following the death of unarmed black man George Floyd in police custody in the US, a more muted response took place in Africa, with small-scale protests held across the continent. Anti-racism protesters in Ghana's capital, Accra, held a vigil for George Floyd. The initially peaceful gathering held by the Economic Fighters League, a radical pan-Africanist movement in Ghana, turned into a protest after the arrest of the group's leader.
No justice! No peace!
We are all black people, we are all African people, and we're just demanding respect, unity, justice, equality, equity, everything. We are done being quiet.
Residents of a Nairobi slum also took to the streets to demonstrate against police brutality. According to Kenya's Independent Policing Oversight Authority, police have played some part in the killing of 15 people since the country put a nighttime curfew in place to combat coronavirus. The organisation said it had received 87 complaints against the police since the end of March. In South Africa, nearly 200 supporters of the far-left Economic Freedom Fighters Party rallied in front of the US Embassy in Pretoria, chanting, "Down with racism and down with Donald Trump."
Down with racism, down! Down with racism, down!
And in Senegal, around 50 people took a knee in front of the Gorée slave trade memorial in Dakar.
It is unacceptable because it is racist. It is unacceptable because it is unfair. If he died for that, he died for us. That means we're all George Floyd.
Meanwhile, outside of Africa, protesters have defaced statues of colonialist leaders who were involved in slavery, in some cases leading to the removal of the monuments altogether. The Belgian port city of Antwerp took down a statue of King Leopold II, known for his brutal rule over what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Millions of Congolese died or were maimed working in rubber plantations and in military expeditions, while Leopold amassed a huge personal fortune. Authorities removed the statue days after anti-racism protesters covered it with paint. A petition has begun in Brussels calling for other monuments to also be removed. A researcher at the country's Africa Museum makes the case for education and change beyond debates about statues.
Il faut que les choses changent.
Things have to change, but via people. It is not enough to destroy the statues of Leopold II, even if destroying them is a violent example. But for me, using explanations, understanding, through writing, that is necessary.
C'est nécessaire.
While some of the statues have come down in Belgium, in Kinshasa itself, King Leopold II is still standing. Here, too, many people feel a need for an increase in education on past injustices.
I think that the real story must be told in schools and universities so that everyone knows what really happened during slavery and colonization in Africa in general.
The ramifications of the death of George Floyd look set to continue raising questions about both our history and how to navigate our future.
Now, residents of Bujumbura react after the death of Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza. Evariste, his replacement, was elected last month. Death stunned the nation and left many anxious over its future. The latest dramatic event in a country whose history is littered with presidential assassinations, coups, ethnic massacres, and a long civil war that ended in 2006 and left about 300,000 dead.
Burundians were in shock after the sudden death of veteran President Pierre Nkurunziza, with condolences pouring in from across Africa as the troubled country grappled with the complex legacy of a 15-year rule. Flags in Burundi were lowered to half-mast after the death of the 55-year-old leader who, according to the government, died of a heart attack after feeling unwell for 2 days. Among African leaders, Tanzanian President John Magufuli praised Nkurunziza's strong leadership and his effort to fight for peace, development and democracy, but critics regretted that he had died without justice being served for his rights abuse under his rule.
If you look at what happened, it was surprising. We didn't see it coming. It was said that we had started mourning. You see everywhere that the flags are at half-mast. Most of us thought that activities had ceased, but we saw that a few people showed up. Maybe later on, there will be a lot of people showing up.
Nkurunziza, a fit sports enthusiast and evangelical who believed he was chosen by God to lead the East African nation, leaves behind a country in political and economic turmoil after his divisive rule. His 2015 run for third term in office sparked protests and a failed coup, with violence leaving at least 1,200 dead while some 400,000 fled the country. A climate of fear marked a crackdown on the opposition, and media settled over Burundi, while a personality cult grew around Nkurunziza, which saw the ruling party name him a visionary and supreme guide for patriotism.
We were afraid, wondering how things will turn out. Even now, we haven't been calmed down yet, because we don't know what will happen next.
Nkurunziza had been due to step down in August after his surprise decision not to run in May election, which was won by the ruling CNDD-FDD's handpicked successor Evariste Ndayishimiye. In Bujumbura, dignitaries and diplomats lined up to sign a condolence book at the presidency. Rumors swirled on social media, with some wondering if he had been poisoned, while others suspecting he had been infected by coronavirus. Burundi has largely ignored the pandemic, which Nkurunziza declared had spared Burundi thanks to God. Nyebenda had been Nkurunziza's first pick to succeed him, but powerful generals in the ruling party chose Ndayishimiye instead.
We feel really bad. We are not at peace, really hurt. You understand when you lose a president.
Nkurunziza withdrew his country from the International Criminal Court in 2017 and at last year shut down a local United Nations rights office which was probing killings, enforced disappearances and other rights abuses. More recently, Burundi expelled World Health Organization WHO staffers despite the coronavirus pandemic. However, Nkurunziza received praise from his peers on the continent.
He will be remembered for giving us peace. May he rest in peace.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said Africa had lost, and I quote, a leader who was devoted to people-centered sustainable development, self-reliance, the sovereignty of his people and country, as well as peace on the continent, end of quote. The Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta described him as, and I quote, an exceptional leader in many ways. He was a man of great courage. His perseverance and determination saw him pursue his vision for a peaceful and stable Burundi, end of quote. Condolences also came in from Rwanda, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Niger and Somalia.
Soldiers injured in the terrorist attack against an army frontier post on Ivory Coast border with Burkina Faso that killed around 10 people on the night of June 10th to 11th are being repatriated to Abidjan. Military Chief of Staff visits them in an ambulance on the tarmac of the airport. Let's have a look.
Suspected jihadists attacked an army frontier post on Ivory Coast border with Burkina Faso overnight, killing around 10 people. It is the first assault by Islamist extremists on Ivorian soil since March 2016, when a raid on the southeastern beach resort of Grand Bassam left 19 people dead. Dozens of gunmen targeted the frontier post at Kafolo in northeastern Ivory Coast in a pre-dawn operation.
This is a terrorist attack. Whatever its nature, we're in the process of investigating it, and the investigative service will be able to determine at the end of the investigation the precise nature and origin of this attack.
Giving a provisional toll, Armed Forces Chief of Staff Lassina Doumbia said around 10 people were killed at the post, which was manned by army personnel and gendarmes, while 6 were wounded and an attacker was neutralized.
We've made arrangements and will be taking stock of that attack here and then strengthen our presence around the border. I think there'll be air support immediately, and the sweep will, I'm sure, neutralize whoever did this.
The army will conduct air raids in the coming days and will strengthen our presence around the frontier. The attack, launched at around 3 a.m., was carried out by dozens of armed individuals believed to be from the group of Support Islam and Muslims, GSIM, which has a hold on the area, according to a source in Burkina Faso. Security analysts have long worried that a jihadist revolt in the Sahel that began in Mali in 2012 is spreading towards coastal states on the Gulf of Guinea.
Well, that story concludes our program on Africa Focus, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya on Twitter and on Facebook. Send your SMSs to 22999 free of charge. My name is Cherotich Bernadette. Our sign language interpreter for today has been Ms. Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, I want to remind you to maintain high standards of hygiene and social distance. Have a great time and thank you for watching.